We have a very special segment coming up featuring Christina Pirello of Christina Cooks from Public Television and the Create Network. Christina has prepared a very special, healthy Polish dish for us. But before we show you that clip, we'd like to introduce to you some of the crew from Christina Cooks. We have with us Ed Stevens, teleprompter and editing and color correction, and Scott Randolph, who is the director and co-producer, and also Rick Lombardi, producer and technical director. So I know there's a little bit of a Polish connection, really, for a lot of us here. Well, first of all, tell us, how did Christina agree to do the segment for us?
Well, we asked her about this, and then we had to tie her up. We had to twist her arm. We had to drag her screaming.
I'm sure.
No, she was so excited to do this. She was thrilled. I mean, it was immediately, yes, I would love to do this. And it was a little bit of a challenge, too, I think, for her, because she had to remember a story that her grandmother told her about how to make the soup. Mm-hmm. So we'll see that when we actually see the playback.
A little teaser there.
Yes, it is.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
And I understand, Ed, your family has a connection to the shrine and to the festival.
Yes, my mother and father were instrumental in starting things up way back when the shrine wasn't here and just the old wooden church. And actually, it's a secret that they don't know. Back then, when I was a young kid, I had a polka band. And we were the first band to start playing here.
At the festival?
At the festival, yeah.
What was the name of the band?
Ed Stefanovich and his orchestra.
Wow. So
yeah, it's like 7-piece band.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Now, see, that's why I said you guys didn't know that.
So what instrument do you play?
Keyboards. I played accordion back then.
Accordion.
But now
Look
keyboards.
at that.
I marched in the Polish-American string band. So
I have a special devotion to the Polish-American String Band. My dad was in the band.
Oh, really?
Yes, and there'll be a special segment on the string band during this
wonderful.
telethon.
Wow.
I've known him for, 3 decades at least, and I did not know that about him.
Yeah.
Wow. What years were you in the band? Polish-American?
Oh, God, I was still in high school.
Okay.
So it was a long time ago. I don't even know the dates, but
Okay.
I only marched 1 year.
Oh, okay.
And because then I started playing in nightclubs and stuff.
Sure.
It's like that, the band going.
Sure.
But no, my mother and father, after that, were up here almost every Saturday and Sunday, and they enjoyed it and saw the shrine grow. And my sister was instrumental also in coming up here. She was a member of PKM, which I know you might know. And my whole family was involved with that. Matter of fact, when my mother and father passed, they're buried here. And which this is my final resting place also.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So,
that's beautiful. Can you tell us what is the difference? Like, what differences do you see from the very first festival to now?
It was a lot of years ago. All I remember is showing us about where the grounds would be. But I remember back with the old wooden church was down low, down further, and I remember a lean-to where we played in there, and there was some animal in there too, like a cow or something. And there was no electricity, so they had to get electricity from a generator so that we could play our instruments and hook up everything. And it was just nothing but fun, you know? It was a new thing for us. And just like everyone else who was on camera and said they worked in booths, and it was a lot of fun. That's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
Everybody chipped in, it was fun.
Yeah. And I bet you if we looked at archival photos from the very first festival or second festival or third, one of the early ones, your band would probably be there.
I think I might have it.
Wow. Isn't that beautiful, though, that connection? Here we are today talking about the festival. This would have been our 54th festival, and to have you here, who played at one of the very first ones. That's really special connection.
I don't want to say that was 54 years ago.
Beautiful, beautiful. That's really, really wonderful. Thank you for being here today.
It was great.
Amazing. And Scott, you also said that you have a Polish connection?
I do. My wife is Polish, and pretty much her whole family is Polish. And my family, my immediate family, we follow all of the Polish traditions.
Oh, beautiful.
And especially at Christmas time, which is, it's great. And we're glad to pass that on to our kids. So I'm not Polish, but my kids are.
That's nice. And we talked about earlier in earlier segments about, the educational aspect of the festival. So I'm an educator, and I also look at the festival as an educational, environment that we teach people about Polish culture, about the rich Polish culture and history and the beauty of the Polish language. And as you mentioned, that's another thread that connects us from the very beginning of the festival to now, is just the fun atmosphere, the feeling of community, the feeling of family and tradition. And it's beautiful. So, it's so funny because wherever I go, no matter what kind of professional or social environment I'm in, I always meet good Polish people who have some connection, to Poland.
If you don't mind, and I have another, from my family, connection to Poland.
Sure.
We're all are familiar with the very famous Polish general during the American Revolution of,
Kosciuszko or Pulaski?
Pulaski, Kazimierz Pulaski.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when Kazimierz Pulaski was in Ocean County, New Jersey, the house that he used as his headquarters was one of my great-grandfather's homes. A man by the name of James Willits is one of my grandfather, number whatever. On my dad's side of the family, we go back to the 1600s, and we founded most of Ocean County, including that farmland where he was at during the American Revolution, and the home that he used as his headquarters was my grandfather's home. And then there was a famous battle, that very small battle, it was more like a skirmish, that took place on what was called the Ridgeway Farm. And I'm also a direct descendant of the Ridgeways as well. So, so there's another Polish connection for me as well. Yeah,
that's fantastic. And of course, Kazimierz Pulaski was granted honorary American citizenship because he died after the Battle of Savannah. And so he was one of two famous, here I go with my educational piece, one of two Polish generals who came from Poland to fight in our revolution, Thaddeus Kościuszko and Kazimierz Pulaski.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah, and my family knew him. How about that?
That is so cool. Very, very cool. Awesome. Well, we're looking forward to looking at that clip from Christina, actually. Let's go to it now.
Sounds good.
Hi, I'm Christina Pirello, and we are here on the set of Christina Cooks at Walnut Hill College in Philadelphia. I'd like to send greetings to the Pauline Fathers, festival guests, and volunteers of the annual Polish-American Festival at Czestochowa. Not bad for an Italian girl, huh? So, when I was a little girl, I grew up in an Italian and Irish household. So when Rick asked me to do this, I thought, well, let me just go online and look up Polish cooking and see what I could come up with. But then I remembered, my mother-in-law, who's 150, is Polish. And I mean, speaks Polish. I was teaching a class at the Cape Cod Community College, and at the end of the day, she came in, and I introduced her, and there was a Polish woman there, and they immediately fall into this completely fluent conversation. So I thought, would there be a better expert than her? So after she told me the story of how they used to spread lard and then butter and sauerkraut on bread, I'm like, Harriet, something a little healthier, maybe. So she started to talk about, don't do cabbage rolls. She said, everybody does that. It's too common. Do something else. And after a conversation, we came up with this recipe called Bigos, or hunter stew. And when she told me how they make it, except for a few ingredients, I thought, it sounds like an Italian ciabatta, which is another stew. So it seems to me that every European culture had these sort of basic, hearty, stew-type dishes that were designed to nourish people, keep you warm, keep you fed for a long time. Now, mine's a little healthier than the one my mother-in-law gave me because hers had kielbasa, pork, and beef, and mine has none of the above. So, but I'm going to do a lot of the things that she did tell me to do. One of them seems odd to me, but I'm going to do it because she said so and she's the expert. So what I have in this pan is some avocado oil because I don't use butter because I cook healthy vegan food. So this is avocado oil. It's going to give it a buttery finish. So now I'm just going to take a plain yellow onion, and we're going to cut it into sort of medium chunks. And these are going to go into the oil and then turn the oil on so that the onion begins to sweat. And on top of that, and this is the ingredient that didn't make sense to me, my mother-in-law said they either put into the stew prunes or sauerkraut. And I said, what about both? And she went, that's crazy. But I thought, so are prunes in a dish. So, and I know this is sacrilege, especially if you're Polish, not a fan of sauerkraut, I decided to go with the prunes. So we're going to chop them into chunks as well and put them in to saute with the onion. And I'm guessing it's going to give it a nice earthy flavor. And maybe it's similar to when Sicilians use golden raisins and pine nuts. So I'm hopeful. The next thing to go in is mushrooms that are going to be sort of thickly sliced. And I'm using shiitake mushrooms because shiitake mushrooms are known to help lower blood pressure, clean plaque from the veins and arteries, and in general, relax the body. So they go in, and the sizzle's just starting to build. So now we'll add a little pinch of sea salt. You want to use sea salt because it's the most natural form of salt. And we're going to add some hot spice. This is red chili flakes ground up into a powder. My mother-in-law said this stew is spicy. And I was thinking, yeah, with all that meat, it better be. So we're going to start moving the veggies around now. And now I'm going to add the smoked paprika, which is a flavor that I love. And when my mother-in-law said this goes in the stew, I was very happy because I put it into all my chilies and I just thought I was like, yay. So that goes in. And what happens as you're sauteing the onions at this point and the mushroom and the prunes is what you're getting is this great perfume start to happen. And I'm sure everyone who's watching this has made Bigos, and already I'm not doing it right. But it smells really good in here, so we're going to start with this. And next we're going to add a carrot. And we're just going to take the carrot and cut it into what I call roll cut chunks. And that just means you turn the carrot every like 90 degrees, and what you get are these little chunk pieces that will turn sort of soft but not mushy in your stew. And you want to leave the top off because that's sort of brown and not healthy anyway. So that goes in, another pinch of salt. And what the salt does every time you add a pinch is it allows you to build a depth of flavor. So now what you have is a stew that smells and tastes amazing, and all the ingredients taste like themselves. So now we have fingerling potatoes. My mother-in-law said this stew was not complete without potatoes. That's also true about the Italian stew. But I'm using fingerlings because they're small, they're less starchy, they have less sugar, so they're not going to affect your joints, right? Potatoes are part of a vegetable family known as the nightshades, and they each contain an alkaloid called solanine, which for some reason settles right into our joints and causes us to be arthritic. But little fingerling potatoes, unlike big starchy potatoes, have less of that alkaloid. So I tend to use those when I cook, and they're sweet and they're lovely. Put them in the oven with olive oil and rosemary, and I've just diverged away from Polish cooking to Italian, which is natural for me. So there we are. So the next thing to go in are crushed tomatoes. And crushed tomatoes, I guess, are going to form the soupy part of the stew. And for me, in this dish, the next ingredient that goes in here is actually the star of the show, and that's green cabbage. And I know there's not a Polish housewife or cook out there that hasn't used green cabbage. And we love it because it's cheap and it's humble and we can cook it in many, many ways. But the truth is, green cabbage is the greatest anti-inflammatory of all time. And we know that an anti-inflammatory diet helps to keep us healthier because the body doesn't struggle with chronic inflammation, which is, I think, the reason my mother-in-law is 100.5. The joke in our house is the apocalypse will come and everyone will be dead except my mother-in-law and her 96-year-old sister. And I swear to God, it's because they eat so much cabbage. So we're going to take it and cut it into chunks. And this is a stew that if it were cooking in the winter, I would cut pieces to be a lot bigger so that it would cook a long time and keep us warm. But this time of year, I tend to go a little bit smaller with my pieces so the stew is lighter. And now you're probably wondering, okay, so far, I mean, it's cute, but where's the protein? Where's the meat? Well, what we're going to use for our meat substitute, I mean, you can use vegan sausage and all those products that are out there, but what I'm using is something called seitan or wheat meat, and what it is gluten. All it is 100% gluten from bread flour, and it's kneaded under hot and cold water until gluten forms, and then it's cooked in a savory broth to create this sort of meat-like texture. And what I like about this is it's hearty enough to make a stew and has a texture that's meaty, which seems weird coming from a vegan, but you know, you wouldn't want to use tofu in this stew. I mean, you could if you were a bunch of diehard vegans, but since we don't know, we're just going to do something that's a little heartier. Now we're going to stir that in. And that's our last ingredient. If you want to check it for hot spice, what you do is just like give it a whiff. And if you think it could use a little more, you add it now. I think it could use a little smoked paprika. And then this is gonna cook for about 20 to 25 minutes until the vegetables all bleed their juices into the tomato sauce and it all comes together to create this sort of cohesive stew. And there you have it, Bigos. Hey, Rick, what up? I know. Here, put your nose over that.
What smells so good?
The dish.
This is really good.
The vegan dish, Rick.
Yeah, it's
Remember back in the day?
I do. and,
Go ahead, you can tell it. I won't be embarrassed.
There's a quick story that I'll tell, because Christina's so good at telling stories. I will compliment her with one. When we were first asked to shoot the show, and we came in, we all were aware of that there was this type of food and all of that, but we didn't really know how it was put together. We didn't get the ingredients. So we're behind cameras and behind switchers and audio and all, and we're looking, we're saying, that's really interesting. I've never heard of that before.
And they knew it smelled good
Yes.
if they were in the room.
Yes. And we were all wondering, what does it really taste like? Well, between shows, food is distributed out sometimes to the audience and most of the time to the crew. I mean, we wanted to taste what we were actually tasting. So we would go up to it when she would put it out and we'd be looking at it like this and looking at each other. You want to try? You want to try? And when we tried it, it was a slow, and all of a sudden like, holy cow, that has a lot of flavor to it. But the best story for me is the brownies.
The brownie. Because you have a little sweet tooth.
A little, a little. I have a big sweet tooth, right? And I'm skeptical at times as to how something can be healthy for you, but at the same time tasty. I just was skeptical. So
we made brownies.
And she brought in brownies after the segment was done, after the show was done, put it down on the table, and we're all looking at it like this, and we got to try this because how can this be that good? I think I must have had 5 of them. Right then and there. And then I went up to her, asked her, I said, okay, I just had this bunch of brownies. How good is this really for me? And she says to me, Rick, you can do as much of that as you want because it's really good for you.
As much as you want. That's right. That's right. You can as much as you want.
I went back into the room and I said, anybody else want brownies? Everybody's busy doing their thing. I grabbed them, put them in a bag, and left. See ya. Bye.
And he's been with me ever since.
I have.
Yeah?
It's been wonderful. And everybody, you must tune into Christina Cooks because you will get some of the best, healthiest recipes you've ever seen.
And they smell like that, which means they're going to taste like that.
Yummy.
Really nice. That's nice too. Thanks, Rick.
My pleasure.
So our hunter stew is finished. So we're just gonna ladle up a big serving of it. There you go. And I want to say thank you to the Friends of the Polish American Family Festival and Country Fair in Doylestown for hanging out with me today while I make a vegan hunter stew. And I hope we see you on Christina Cooks.